if you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing.
You're called an
You've
You've been called an anti-Semite more than anyone else's table.
Yeah.
And people will sit there and no, by me, I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians. So I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is that
you just say I should die.
You should not.
No,
did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. No, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope you don't.
Let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because I'm a big supporter
of the Palestinians.
Hamas.
Guys, let me
say
stop.
Palestinian.
Are you?
Am I what? No, of course I'm not.
I
apologize.
Are you a racist, violent person inciting violence against
Ryan?
That's
disgusting. That is completely.
I apologize.
Good job, CNN. Let's have first block say the Muslim guy should be blown up.
I apologize
on TV.
Don't say then I apologize. You literally.
I thought you said Hamas.
You didn't think I said Hamas. I said I supported Palestinian rights.
Why? Because when you hear
what's funny is Rudy Giuliani said this yesterday, so you're a great guest to be here to defend Rudy Giuliani.
I wasn't going to entertain nonsense today, and so at this point,
this is what we're in now. This is America in 2024.
Here's what I will say.
Forget the racism.
That's right.
I should die.
I didn't say that. You
said
die.
What does beeper mean? Don't give me a fake.
I did not say you should die.
Why did you say with my beeper?
What did you mean?
What did you mean by the beeper? What did you mean by the beeper? No, you didn't. You said I hope your beeper doesn't go off.
Ryan, stop talking.
At least have the guts to support your racist comment.
I'm so sorry.
Welcome to Let It Be Known, and this is really what it's come down to. Kamala Harris is having her closing arguments today at all places. The Ellipse, which really is probably the best place for her, is probably a great idea to have it there. But really, only thing, Lauren, she really needs to do, in my opinion, is just play clips like that for like an hour, and then just say, you know what, make your choice. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. But the other part of it is this: CNN, NBC, all of these guys continue to platform hate. And that's the bottom line. They do nothing about it. They always have, and it takes me back to we just talked about what's his name? Charlemagne was on Anderson Cooper, and he told Anderson the truth. He said, you guys platform this stuff and expect to have a discussion, a normal discussion. Come on, give me a break. You're not looking to have a normal discussion.
Right. Yeah.
That was insane.
Yeah, they're looking for a spectacle for ratings because they're losing rating market share because of all these other competing entities, from gaming to you name it, right? So other channels, YouTube, I think, is a huge place of competition for broadcast media. And quite frankly, what's happening is they're getting overtaken because you can find deeper and more interesting discussions from random people on YouTube a lot of times than you can the so-called mainstream media. And I remember during the Jonathan Majors case, which I sat in on, so I could really see what was going on in the courtroom and then what people were writing in the mainstream media. And I was shocked. You had literally random people who were just interested in the case, and they had a little YouTube show on the Jonathan Majors case, and they had a more thorough analysis. I mean, and it was not, even some of them were even fans of Jonathan Majors, and they were still more objective and getting to the facts than mainstream media, which was just sort of going through the motions. So with something like this, what it reveals is that you're looking for spectacle. That's always been the problem when the internet came along, because the broadcast and mainstream media outlets had to compete with content that was getting online immediately from lay people, right?
Right.
And a profession that has no licensing and no standards, and everybody's just making it up as they go, moment to moment. You're competing against everything. You're competing against Facebook. You're competing against Twitter. You're competing against everybody for content. And you got to realize that. And some of those people, some of them are better. They really are better than what you could find on CNN and MSNBC. And that's been the problem.
And poor Abby Phillips, she looked like Ricky Lake, like the Ricky Lake show. She had no control of that.
Well, that happens almost every night on that show. It's by design. I mean, as somebody who's been on CNN and MSNBC, there's a pre-interview, and particularly for CNN, there's a pre-interview where they call you up and say, what are you going to say tonight? We're going to ask you this. What are you going to say? I always thought that the pre-interview was really for the benefit of the anchor, because the anchor, oftentimes these anchors have big fat egos, and they don't want anyone on the show to outshine them. So they want to know what you're going to say to prepare what they're going to say back. Okay. So they're not just acting as the moderator. They're actually wanting to look smart. So there's that element. in this particular case, I think the entire show is built on this house of cards of spectacle. We want it to look crazy. It's basically Crossfire with too many people. And so you got all these people talking. You can tell, particularly on the conservative side, they're picking people who are incendiary. Nobody can tell that there aren't conservatives out there like Shermichael Singleton who can have a discussion without getting crazy and make some really sort of good points from a right-wing standpoint. But who do they get? They get Byron Donalds. They get the former congressman from Virginia Beach, what's his name, who is just a jerk, quite frankly. They get that guy, what is the dude's name that they have almost every single night? I don't know why.
Well, and the thing with that is that it's not like they can't get somebody else.
Right. Scott Jennings.
So you know it's intentional.
Right. Scott Jennings is intentional. They're not just giving him a contract. He is saying things from a completely right-wing standpoint and never at any point, this is when you know it's in bad faith, whether it's right or left, when they always agree with the right, no matter what the right does. So if there's a racist rally at Madison Square Garden, we're agreeing with it anyway, type thing. And so that's who they've booked. That's intentional, and that's on them.
Lauren, speaking of that Nazi rally, fascist rally, whatever you want to call it, at Madison Square Garden on Sunday, I believe it affected the Knicks last night because they lost to Cleveland at home, but I really believe it had some effect. But nonetheless, speaking of that, is this country that far gone that after that spectacle, I mean, after everything else, really, but then to close it with that spectacle, is this country that far gone that they're going to elect this dictator?
Well, I don't know if it's a matter of being far gone. The country's history is pretty clear when it comes to minority groups of color. So it's actually on brand to some extent, which is why Donald Trump is able to get, over 70 million votes per election. No, we knew full well who he was in 2016, and we sure as hell knew full well who he was in 2020. He's turned up the volume another notch. No surprise there. So the rally that he has some racist that gets up and says racist things. There's really no surprise there. I'm not sure why people are surprised. I don't know why Joe Scarborough is surprised. They've been doing this the entire campaign. The major cornerstone of the campaign is vilifying people of color, whether you were talking about the Congo or Haiti or Venezuela or Mexico. I mean, it's always people of color. He's been doing this for years. And the people around him, Stephen Miller got up and said, America is only for Americans. What are you, American Indian? Then what are you doing here? Like the idea that like they don't even know their own history in the United States, right? So that racism has always been on brand. I don't think anybody should be surprised about it at this point. The question is always, what are we going to do about it?
The audacity to stand up in New York City, the heart of New York City, and trash Puerto Rico.
Oh, I know. I know.
That
huge Puerto Rican population in New York City. Right. Yeah.
It shows you too, right? That they just don't care. This is what it is, and you're not going to do anything about it.
Well, they think that there's enough white folks in the country who agree with them and will outnumber. So they're trying to go for the base. I actually think the strategy of going for the base is actually right, but the way they're doing it is completely wrong. It never enters the mind of the MAGA Republicans that it might be a better strategy to widen the tent and say some things to get some more people into the party rather than to go for broke, which is what they're doing. They're also assuming that there's a majority of white folks or white voters in the country who are racist. I don't actually think that's true. If that was true, Trump would have won in 2020. So the dynamic that's different though here is, of course, but Joe Biden is likely better at getting white voters than Kamala Harris. I'm going to go ahead and guess that, particularly in places like Pennsylvania. So the question is, can she pull it off? But he's presenting as so unhinged and crazy that I almost think anyone could likely pull it off against him when you act like that, because I do think there's a bunch of white voters out there that don't want to be aligned with this. They don't want to be associated with this type of thing. It plays into the entire stereotype that they hate, which is, oh my God, it's about race. Well, yeah, it's about race. It's funny because when you're progressively arguing on a show, you're often having some conservative guests tell you that you keep bringing race up and you keep, this is not about race. Well, what is Donald Trump doing every day? Every rally, he makes it about race. He's making it about race and immigration. So give me a break.
And speaking of Donald Trump. The Washington Post has been rocked by a tidal wave of cancellations from digital subscribers and a series of resignations from columnists as the paper continues to grapple with the fallout of owner Jeff Bezos' decision to block an endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris for president. More than 200,000 people have canceled their digital subscriptions by midday Monday, according to two people at the paper with knowledge of internal matters. And they say not all of the cancellations take effect immediately, but still the figure represents about 8% of the paper's paid circulation of roughly about 2.5 million subscribers, which includes print as well. But the number of cancellations, Lauren, as you know, and as you've been informing Greer and I, continued to grow yesterday. And this is really directly tied, as we said, Bezos blocked the endorsement of the vice president really because he's afraid that Amazon has all these government contracts, and if Trump returns to office, he's going to lose those contracts.
You know, he wrote a op-ed last night. It came down at about, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock last night. He claims that the meeting with regard to his company and that conflict of interest was really just a coincidence. They have meetings all the time, and that the meeting coincided with the decision not to publish an endorsement. I actually tend to believe Bezos on that because Bezos has never been known to interfere with the editorial side of the Washington Post until this moment. And that is confirmed, that is confirmed by Marty Baron in his book, which I read, Collision of Power. And that was always surprising to me. I was always expecting when Bezos bought the Post 11 years ago that he was going to interfere with the editorial side of the Washington Post. They have actually written a few things. When I say the editorial side, interfere with the reporting side. They've actually written, and the editorial side, but they've actually written a few things that were tough on Amazon that got in the paper. So I tend to believe Bezos when he says there was a coincidence. However, for this to be the first time, for you to pick this moment as the first time that you're going to refrain from a presidential endorsement is a horrifically bad decision on so many fronts. Number one, for the first time in American history, which is almost 250 years, we have a Black woman as a nominee of a major party, and you choose that moment not to have an endorsement. Now, of course, the Post is not 250 years old, but the Post is old enough that they've made several other endorsements, including this year.
This is the first time since 1976, right? That they are not endorsing.
Right, 76. And they endorsed in this cycle. They endorsed in the Maryland Senate race, and they endorsed in some other races in Virginia. So I'm not sure why suddenly the presidential race was different. You look racist because this is only the second woman that we've had as a major party nominee. Obviously, Hillary Clinton being the other one in 2016, in which they did do an endorsement. They did an endorsement 4 years ago. I find it hard to believe that if Biden was still on the ticket, they wouldn't have just endorsed Joe Biden. It's the same thing with Teamsters. Like Sean O'Brien somehow, twist himself into a pretzel to say that the Teamsters suddenly can't endorse Kamala Harris. In a year when we have a Black woman and a woman, on this ticket, you look racist and misogynist. Okay. I mean, we do have to bring up that it's an amazing coincidence. Now, all of a sudden, there's a policy change when there's a Black woman that might be endorsed. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is who she's running against. You're running against a man, Donald Trump, who has specifically attacked the Fourth Estate, the media, the press, from the podium stage directly. We've had attacks from his supporters on members of the media standing in the media area at rallies. Okay. We've had, epithets hurled at them and all sorts of other drama. It was Donald Trump that pulled the press pass of CNN at the White House, Jim Acosta, which of course he got back. He is attacking free speech and freedom of the press and the First Amendment specifically. For that reason alone, there should have been an endorsement. And I knew Marty Baron was going to go off when this happened, because his entire book is about this, that democracy dies under darkness and collision of power is about how the Post had to go up against Donald Trump. The third reason that this is bizarre, of course, is that this is the Washington Post, the paper that went up against the government with regard to the Pentagon Papers. Kay Graham, then the publisher, and Ben Bradley went up against the U.S. government, the Nixon administration, with regard to the Pentagon Papers. They're storied for that reason, for the fighting for democracy reason. You have on your masthead a slogan Democracy dies
in darkness.
And you don't make an endorsement against the man that is against all of your principles. That makes no sense at all. I don't know what Jeff Bezos is thinking. I mean, what do you think he's thinking?
Well, David Youngblood says his statement said their endorsement wouldn't sway anyone, and yet as you said, they endorsed other races. So which is it? And he also says his op-ed was disingenuous. Now that op-ed, as we showed some of it, I mean, he talked about them not having the credibility that they once had. He talked about not being as trusted as they once were. Those are some serious words.
Well, the entire title of the thing and the media is not trusted, and our we did have a Gallup poll that came out about 2 weeks ago that showed that the media was underneath politicians for the first time, literally the lowest in terms of disliked entities in the United States. Well, this is the reason, because when you don't stand for anything, okay, people are not going to trust you. So what does the Washington Post stand for in this moment? I mean, I'm a little bit confused. You say you stand for protecting democracy. Certainly, Marty Baron talked endlessly about reporters who had been killed overseas in nations that had dictatorial leaders and styles of government that hated the press. You, the Washington Post, say that that's what you stand for. And then you don't put out the easiest editorial in the world. Even the New York Times, which I think their coverage is extremely questionable this cycle. Extremely questionable for not calling out Donald Trump. And yet they put out an editorial endorsing Vice President Harris for the very reasons that the Washington Post should have. So this is a massive, massive mistake, because it goes against the brand of the institution that is the Washington Post.
As Austin points out, USA Today, Gannett, and the LA Times editorial boards are also, he says, editorial cowards. They refuse to endorse. We know the LA Times, we talked about the LA Times' story a few days ago. You're right. This comes down to, it's not about anything except they just can't stomach endorsing a Black woman.
I think that's part of it, particularly with Will Lewis sitting there. I mean, Will Lewis is coming from England and is a protege of Rupert Murdoch, so that feels right to me. But let's read, shall we, what Bezos wrote last night. Okay. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. Ending them is a principled decision, and it is the right one. He is completely wrong. I actually think what has happened here is that Jeff Bezos is a businessman. He has spent most of his life selling books and building, I think, an incredible website, which I use all the time. I think he's done a great job at that. I think Amazon is an incredible site that we didn't have before, when you get things delivered the next day. I mean, Jeff Bezos created that, but I don't think he's an expert in journalism or journalistic rules. And when I see something written like this, the perception of non-independence and we don't want to create the perception of bias. Is he kidding? The Washington Post and the New York Times have all sorts of biases, I can assure you. And somebody who has dealt with these people on an individual basis, they have a racial bias in that newsroom that is off the chain. They have an education bias because they tend to be people, they've gone to private schools, they've gone to Harvard and Yale. I'm always dealing with people who've gone to Stanford. They are, one thing he did right that I did agree with, actually. He stumbled onto something that I think is right on the money, which it's interesting that he brought this up. It was effectively the elites argument, which he stumbled onto. And he writes effectively that, we're talking to ourselves and, we're elitist effectively. And I thought, yeah, you're right, because you hire the same types of people. They think the same types of thing. And as somebody who's had to argue with these people, specifically about Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, I mean, they all just believe the same thing. I was just like, there was not one person that I was dealing with at the Washington Post that I felt like would get up at an editorial meeting and say, look, this is a little strange. This man was a standout in high school and college, lieutenant governor, all of a sudden looks like he's going to be governor. And all of a sudden these stories come out, and we're left to believe that a Black man walking around at Duke would have this type of terrible rumor around him, and nobody says it. See, there's nobody at the Washington Post that would have that argument that I know of. And that means to me that your bias is the bias it was for these papers back in the 1800s, which is that black men are automatically guilty. We're all white. We get to decide. We living in Bethesda and McLean get to decide these things. I mean, so he's right about the elitist argument. Bezos hit on something I think is extremely important.
Mhm.
But there's bias at all of these papers by dint of who they hire. And they tend to hire people who spent their life in some English lit class. Then they get into a newsroom, and that's their entire breadth of experience. They
Right,
weren't
right.
lawyers, doctors, police, and it's very hard to get them to think that they don't know everything. They tend to think they know everything, which is a big problem in the media.
An individual posted under the name Aquarius Goddess says that Gayle King said that Jeff Bezos' statement is, quote, well thought out. That individual says, is anyone surprised? I mean, give me a break. Anytime there's some sort of, it's crazy. Let me just say this. It's just, I'll put it just very simple. It's crazy for a Gayle King to, in any way, shape, or form, endorse what Bezos did. It's just absolutely mind-boggling.
Well, Gayle King, who sat silent during the Ta-Nehisi Coates thing, Gayle King, who sat there and gave Lisa Leslie a hard time during the Kobe Bryant interview.
Oh gosh.
Gayle King, who interviewed both of Justin Fairfax's accusers and didn't even tell us about it beforehand. I had to call her and text her beforehand and say, what's going on here? Because that was all done in the name of, we want spectacle, just like we saw on CNN last night. This is about spectacle. It's not about finding the truth anymore. If it's about finding the truth, you call all the parties and you say, what's going on? What's your side before you air something? And then when you find out more facts later after you've aired something that might indicate that something's wrong with the original story, you report that. So Gayle King is part of the establishment that, is just into this. Like, she's not somebody that I would consider, she's not to be confused with Edward R. Murrow. I was telling people.
Look, David Youngblood basically says that she's not too different from a bag of rocks. Obviously, I'm improvising what he said, but
I mean, let's be real about Gayle King. The reason we're looking at Gayle King is she's friends with Oprah Winfrey. Do we really think that CBS would have hired Gayle King if she wasn't friends with Oprah Winfrey?
No.
I mean, she was on a station in Connecticut. She probably would still be in Connecticut if she wasn't friends with Oprah Winfrey. Yeah. I don't, I mean, I have nothing personally against her, but my dealings with her were I felt like I was dealing with a very shallow journalist. This was not 60 Minutes. CBS.
She's not a journalist. That's the thing too. And you've made this point a lot about how everybody's a journalist. Gayle King is not a journalist. She's an anchor, right?
She's a personality.
Personality, not an anchor, right?
She's infotainment. But again, we're in a profession, unlike lawyers, unlike doctors, unlike police. We have a profession with no rules because the First Amendment has said that effectively anybody's a journalist. Anybody that's got one of these in their hand at any moment can be a journalist or I should say a reporter. And that's why when you're running any sort of journalistic business, right, which I am, I consider everybody competition. Whether they're posting on their Facebook or their X account, they're competing because they're reporting something when they do that. We don't want to admit that. We want to get into this, if you don't have a press pass, I mean, if you don't work at a big highfalutin news organization and you don't have a press pass, you're, quote, not a journalist. That's nonsense. So there are no standards for the profession. And when there's no standards for entry, like a license or whatever, anybody can do whatever the heck they want. So you end up with, and I'm not criticizing him, I actually think he's pretty smart. But Charlemagne the God is now a journalist. Shannon Sharp is not. I mean, I'm not saying that these guys are not good interviewers. I'm just saying we need to get over this thing as journalists, this idea that we're special because we work at a news organization. I mean, everyone can do what we're doing if they're intelligent and they ask good questions. But Gayle King is a product of the infotainment side of, quote, journalism.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Lisa Leslie thing. That was the most atrocious, one of the most atrocious things I've ever seen under the guise of journalism. But we move on. In the shadow of the White House today, Vice President Harris is going to deliver a closing argument to the American people as to why she should be elected the next president of the United States. Some 20,000 people are expected to attend the rally on the ellipse between East Street Northwest and Constitutional Constitution Avenue Northwest, 15th and 17th Street Northwest. According to the permit from the National Park Service, overflow crowds are going to be directed to the northeast grounds of the Washington Monument. The number of expected attendees swelled from 8,000 on the initial permit, and the Harris Walls campaign was advertising the event on social media platforms. So it just, from there, it just blossomed to what it is. The gates are going to open at 3 o'clock, Lauren. The program isn't expected to begin until about 7 and end at 9. And as you pointed out pre-show, it's going to be cold out there. But let's just get right into why this venue, Lauren.
Maybe because it mirrors the venue that Donald Trump used on January 6, 2021. I'm thinking that might be a reason. And it is a grand.
It is the venue. It doesn't mirror it.
It's the exact same venue. Okay. That's probably the reason. This is the type of event you can cover without actually being like in the queue, which I suspect is going to be a pain in the neck being in, because you have to go through 800 levels of security and then stand around for 4 hours. You know, I don't know who has the endurance for that. I typically have the endurance, but I don't have the patience. You know, I'm like, look, they've already, the White House, or I shouldn't say the White House, the Harris campaign has already turned down the media organization that I own, which is Black Virginia News. Although the photographer, Paulette Singleton, she put her credentials, I believe, under Hazel Trice Edney's Newswire. Either way, it doesn't matter. You've just turned down 2 Black news organizations. So I don't get what they're doing or who they're inviting, but I'm sure that they'll have 500 AP photographers that they have credentialed, because that's the way that winners and losers are decided when it comes to credentials. We give, 8 to 10 credentials to AP and Reuters, or a Getty, and then a Black news organization covering a Black person with a specific Black audience gets ignored. So that's part of the game as well. I don't know what that's going to be. I suspect it's going to be an amalgamation of what we've already heard, which is fine. But this race, to me, if it's not about how crazy Donald Trump is, then there's a problem for the vice president. It's got to be about, in a large way, how crazy Donald Trump is and how dangerous Donald Trump is.
Yeah, that certainly has to be her closing argument, and she has to do it in a way in which she's not just talking to her people. She's got to get it across to everyone, and it's a delicate balance, because those who support him or those who might be on the fence, they're almost as crazy as he is.
Yeah. Well, nobody at this point should be undecided. I mean, I think it was CNN that reported that there aren't that many undecideds left. I don't know how anybody could be undecided at this point, even like a month out. I don't know. I mean, you're either picking one or the other. Or these are 2 very different candidates with 2 very different messages. I do understand, though, that a lot of people do just vote party, Democrat and Republican. Mm-hmm. But it is, I think, encouraging to see the number of Republicans who have now come out and stated publicly that they've had enough of this. And a lot of them showed up at a rally, and I think it was Pennsylvania, for the vice president to say publicly, we've had enough of this and we're supporting and voting for the vice president. These are Republicans. That was an interesting thing. You saw Lindsey Graham lose his mind on, Meet the Press over that, because it's real. There's a lot of Republicans who just, again, don't want to have anything to do with this. But it's scary to see how close he can get and how many millions. He's going to get millions and millions of votes. Donald Trump is going to get millions and millions
60 plus million, if not the 70 again.
Yeah. So, what it tells you is that racism is not disqualifying, right? So, in Virginia, I cover a lot of Virginia because of Black Virginia News. I was writing the other day that effectively we have a governor, Glenn Youngkin, and Jason Miyares, and a Black lieutenant governor, Winsome Sears, who's from Jamaica, right, who have said nothing about Trump's racism. Nothing. Literally, absolutely nothing. So you're telling me that wasn't disqualifying for you? I'm not talking about just Madison Square Garden and Puerto Ricans. I'm talking about this entire production.
Yeah.
And now
you got Byron Donalds walking out on stage to Dixie or whatever it was, whistling Dixie. Well, I don't know what the song was, but it's one of them Confederate songs that he played just before he came out. I mean, come on.
It was Elvis. I wish I was in Dixie. I will say in fairness to, as much as I'm not a big fan of Byron Donalds, I will say, in fairness, I've been to a few Trump rallies. That is one of the standard songs that they play at every single rally, that Elvis rendition of Dixieland. And I think what happened there is I guarantee you somebody in the back thought it was cute to play it a few minutes before a black guy walks out. Then Byron Donalds' walkout music plays as Byron Donalds is coming out.
Right.
And he's into rap. And I've actually talked to him about this a little bit, interestingly, in the hallway of right off the House floor. So his walkout music is a different song. It did look like he had come out to Dixie, but actually Dixie stops, and then there's a few seconds that go by, and walk at me. So I don't know that was intentional by Byron Donalds. Just in fairness, I don't know that was intentional.
But it just goes along with, like you said, no one's calling out his racism, including his black supporters.
Well, his black
like
supporters, his black supporters are specifically there to shield and block white people who are him supporters having to deal with the race question, because we can't be racist because we have Mark Robinson and Byron Donalds out here. Of course, that's ridiculous. I mean, because we know what Clarence Thomas is. And by the way, with the media, there's no quicker way if you're a black person to get on national TV than be a black person who criticizes other black people. No quicker way.
Yep.
When the thing happened in Virginia with Justin Fairfax, they got all the black people they could to criticize him in the paper in the Washington Post. I was always looking up and seeing some black person that they got to interview to say what the white people really wanted to say, but it's
like they lock these black folks in the closet somewhere just to hold them and when it's time, they bring them out. The same black folks.
Well, exactly. There's a lot of black people who don't see the game. They don't see that they're being used as a PR tool by a white platform that wants them to speak.
Or maybe they don't mind being used in some cases, right? Because they just think that 5 minutes of fame is going to lead to something else.
Well, for one particular individual I was dealing with, it was clearly because she wanted to be in the paper, who then later ran. Right. She later ran for office. Somebody I worked with that clearly wanted attention. So she ended up in the Washington Post because she's, crapping on the lieutenant governor and wanted to be in the paper. But I do think, honestly, a lot of black people don't see the play. They don't see that they're being used for PR. It's like the same thing that Democrats do when they go down to an event. I was in Virginia this weekend at two homecomings that were at the same time, Norfolk State and Hampton. For some reason, were at the same time, both their football games and their parades. And we had several white politicians at both taking pictures with black folks. And they're using black folks as props, quite frankly, to see, hey, I know black people because I'm here in pictures. And it is a PR prop type thing. And I don't know about you, but as somebody who's been to a few Trump events, one was outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. when he got arraigned. I had several Trump supporters trying to take pictures with me because I'm coming in with obviously nothing. I don't have anything that indicates what I stand for, but I do wear a lot of red. So maybe I was
going to say, if you're wearing red.
But they want to take pictures with you to show, hey, I've got a special Negro here that I'm taking a picture with that is in support of Trump. Well, the left does that as well. They use black people as a shield of, they use black people to criticize other black people, say, see, some of the black people feel that way. Right. Who they don't interview is the sort of more ADOS leaning, more Malcolm X style leaning, really black folks that are sitting in places like Hampton, Virginia. Those are the people they never interview. That's sort of funny. It's crazy.
Listen, so RNG says Trump has a strong 47% and he knows that he'll lose the popular vote. How do you see, Lauren, right now, if you had to guess, the Electoral College playing out? That's what we really got to talk about, is the Electoral College. How do you see that playing out right now?
Well, I mean, we could get a repeat of 2016. She wins the popular vote. Remember that the Republicans are in a struggle to win the popular vote since 2000. They've been in a struggle for 24 years to win the popular vote. I think the only time they did it was Bush-Kerry in the last 24 years, right? They're always losing the popular vote. Okay. So the question becomes the map, and can she win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? And I don't have an answer for that. There was a poll that came out this morning that had Trump ahead in Michigan by 1 point. I mean, if she loses Michigan and Pennsylvania, he wins the election. as far as I can tell, unless some shocker happens where she wins like North Carolina, Florida, and North Carolina, Florida, and something else, Georgia, which I doubt that would happen. So we could get one of these, oh, she won the popular vote, and oh, shoot, she lost the map. I mean, states like Michigan and Wisconsin are going to be hard for her to win, I think.
And you're saying it's going to be hard for her to win. But at the same time, you're saying if she loses Michigan, then it's a wrap.
I don't know whether it's a wrap because, you know, she could pull a shocker with Georgia. And like I said, Georgia and North Carolina would have to go her way. And obviously Arizona, Nevada would have to absolutely go her way. You know, there's all this stuff about Chris Boozy saying that Florida is in play. I'll believe that when I see it. Florida and Texas every freaking cycle. Oh my God, Florida's in play. Texas is in play. Beto O'Rourke. Oh my God, Texas is in play. The Democrats still haven't won anything in Texas, and they've been losing.
You have the Colin Allred, Ted Cruz situation, but I'm with you on that when it comes to Texas, because once Beto didn't win, and it wasn't really particularly close either.
Right.
That to me said that's way out of. I don't care what they say. That's never going to be a play.
And remember, Andrew Gillum got a lot closer. Of the three people that cycle, it was Stacey Abrams, Beto, and Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum got the closest of the three in Florida. Not Beto O'Rourke, the much ballyhooed Beto O'Rourke. I mean, he lost, okay? And he lost, you're right. It wasn't close. It wasn't that close.
Dr. Nicole is asking about those ballots that we saw burned up in that mailbox.
Yeah. I have no idea how they're going to handle that or what they're going to do about that. Obviously, they're going to have to put some sort of a call out to everybody to say that if you put a ballot in the box, you have to come vote again. I don't know how they're going to.
And that's going to cause all types of problems.
Well, actually, you can figure out which ballots were, quote, not returned yet. So there's a way in the system to see, like when I voted last week on Thursday in Virginia, and I stopped getting a bunch of email and stopped getting a bunch of texts because they see that the ballot was returned. I mean, you know, so in this case, yes, it's going to be difficult, but they could see that ballot was not registered. So if they can get it together in that particular precinct or in the area of that precinct, they might be able to figure out what exactly burned. But of course, seeing that image right there that you're showing, seeing that happening tells us, not that we'd already didn't know it, that we're going to have some drama. We're going to have some drama next week. There's no doubt about it in my mind. No doubt about it. We're going to have some drama.
We often talk about, Lauren, about these polls, and you talked about a poll just now. We showed the Times Siena poll, whatever that was, the final poll there, and all of the polls are showing dead heat. But we also talk about it in terms of never trust the polls. What are you seeing with these polls? Are the polls that we're seeing any different this year that we should put more trust in them?
No, it'll be interesting to go back and see who was right. I mean, I think we should all do screenshots of all these predictions from all these people, from Nate Silver to Chris Boozy to Target Smart.
Isn't Silver the one who never gets it wrong? Who's the one that never gets it wrong? As far as
the guy from American University, which is interesting. I went to American University. I didn't have him as a professor, but he is good. He effectively never gets it wrong. I don't know that he's made a
Alan Lichtman.
Alan Lichtman, right? Yeah, right. Alan Lichtman, right. And thanks, Greer. And I don't know that he's made his final prediction, but he never gets it wrong. Sabato is usually pretty close to. And so to me, I'm always sort of listening to Larry Sabato. And I kind of quote know him through X because he always responds to me on X when I write something silly. But I can't wait to. I've screenshotted a bunch of people who've made some pretty bold predictions. Even some Democrats who are saying there's going to be a blue wave. And so I thought,
is there a scenario where you see that though? Can you actually see that? Because remember a couple of years ago during the midterms, it was supposed to be a red wave, and it never materialized.
I could see it, but I again, it's I'll believe it. I'll see it when I believe it. Remember that, you know, Vice President Harris was put into a very unprecedented position. You have effectively a 3-month campaign that you didn't know you were going to have at all. Right. The incumbent sitting president retires, And I'm telling you right now, if she loses, I know exactly who I'm blaming. Okay. I'm blaming Jen O'Malley Dillon. I'm blaming Anita Dunn. I'm blaming the senior White House staff, Donilon, all of those people around Joe Biden.
I'll tell you who you can't blame. We
Who?
talked about this. You talked about this before, and now we're seeing the results. The poll, if the polling is to be believed, you cannot blame black men.
Oh, you
She is
definitely
polling
can't.
better with black men than Biden did in 2020 right now, according to the polls.
Well, let's get back to that after I just say this one thing.
Yes, please.
We're already hearing nonsense about how much of a genius Jen O'Malley Dillon is. Okay. Which is the lead up to, if Vice President Harris wins, she's the reason. No, if Vice President Harris wins, it's Vice President Harris who won. Because what I just saw is somebody who wasn't expecting to run for president of the United States, run a very good campaign with a lot of stamina, a lot of energy, night after night, day after day, no whining and complaining, and did a very good job. And I think she was really underestimated, quite frankly, by a lot of people. And so Biden's staff, quite frankly, hiding and lying about the condition of the current president is how we got here. I just want to say that to get to black men, it's the same old game we hear every 2 years, that black men are somehow going to be going for the Republican. There's never any evidence of it. There's never any proof. It's just people running their mouth, usually people who are Donald Trump, running their mouth about how this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And then we look at the exits and look at the obvious precincts around the country, because you can tell from the precinct count what's going on, right? I mean, if you got a Norfolk district in Virginia that's like 99% black, and they went like all for the Democrat, well, that had to be some black men in there, okay? But there's always making black men the boogeyman is a 400-year process and strategy in the United States. I mean, black men have always been the ones, they're doing something crazy. They're doing this, they're doing that. And you'd have to be pretty crazy as a black male or a black person, period, to be voting for Donald Trump, right? But that whole nonsense that we heard was just straight garbage with no proof attached to it. All right, none. And I blame in part the New York Times, because they're always pulling these rabbits out of a hat with some dumbass story about some singular black dude out of 25 million black dudes in the United States. That's he's supporting Donald Trump. So they can find the one black dude that's supporting Donald Trump, but they can't find all the guys I see every weekend in Virginia and Maryland and DC and beyond and New York. They can't find any of those black men who are voting for Kamala Harris. They can't find any of those. I mean, it's craziness. They're always, when it comes to black men in particular. See, the reason it doesn't happen with black women is that we don't allow it and we kick ass immediately when it's happening. Black men need to get a little bit more organized, because they're always, when it comes to black men, showing a black man that is not representative of the majority of black men out there in this country. It's always some subgroup of a subgroup. It's always some, my God.
Somebody who's talking about hide your kids, hide your wife.
Right. It's always some outlier. And I don't know who these black guys are that they're finding. Because the black guys that I know in my family and beyond are working their asses off on the double shift, on the overtime, cops and police and this and that. And they never find any of those. This media never finds any of those black men that are out. It's just incredible. It's misinfo and disinfo is what it is.
Yeah. Well, switching gears to something, I mean, you talked about Jonathan Majors trial, and I know you cover a lot of trials. The Young Thug trial has been going on forever. It's been going on since like he was born, it seems like. But it's expected to resume today, and the judge may very well today announce that she's declaring a mistrial. Last Friday, she had noted that she was on the verge of declaring a mistrial, but word came in over the weekend and then again yesterday that the prosecutor was in deep negotiations with the remaining defendants, including Young Thug himself, on a plea arrangement. Now, the latest, Young Thug's attorney said that they rejected the latest offer of a plea deal, according to 11 Alive in Georgia, the station channel 11 Alive is what they call it. I remember 11 Alive from New York when I was a kid, so it's strange. But they are apparently, because the judge is leaning heavily toward a mistrial based on last week's craziness once again in that trial. The judge she's a new judge on. I mean, they've had 3 or 4 different judges, and she's like, this is enough. This is absolutely enough. And so he also, Young Thug also has a hearing scheduled for November 4th, a bail hearing. He's been in prison since he's been arrested, and we're going on over 2 years now. But Lauren, how much of this have you followed?
Absolutely none. I have a good friend that followed the Majors case. She follows trials. There's a certain group of YouTubers out there that follow trials, and particularly celebrity trials. And one of them has become a friend of mine from the Majors case. And her name is, her handle on YouTube is Cat Not Williams. And Cat Not Williams, she does lives. She does all sorts of stuff. That's her right there. That pink background right there.
Yeah.
Excellent analysis on the Young Thug trial. She actually had me on live during one of her lives. And I sat there and said, look, I only know what I've seen you do. I can see the crazy. Like, she's, of course, talking about the mistrials and talking about the judge going in on the prosecution. Once I saw that judge going on the prosecution, I knew something was terribly wrong. I mean, I did think that the general underlying case was very strange to bring into court. And of course, it's amazing in America, isn't it? When you're Black, you're the first musician to be brought into court on this ridiculous premise, right? It's amazing how that happens, right? So anyway, I would advise everybody to go to Cat Not Williams, and I'm doing that commercial because her analysis has been really good, really thorough. And I have followed nothing because I've just got too many things to be following, And
would have been in New York. Lauren would have been in the courtroom if this was in New York.
Yeah, if it was in New York, I would absolutely probably take a look at it, at least, and be in an easier position to look at it. But following a trial is a lot of work because you're sitting in court for hours, you're reading documents. I thought, the John Majors situation, he got absolutely railroaded by the politics of the New York DA's office. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, white women in the New York DA's office that want a celebrity Me Too case. And we're just throwing back to the days of the antebellum South on some of these cases. You got a girlfriend chasing a dude down the block in New York on video, and yet he's the aggressor. I mean, come on now. I mean, that was getting into just absolute, craziness. But anyway, Cat Not Williams is really good at covering that trial. There's a few other people as well that I've run into that are on time. And I am not one of those people when it comes to Young Thug, but I suspect something crazy is going on. And if he was white,
I think today is a wrap. I think they're finally going to grant a mistrial, or they will reach some sort of plea arrangement. 9 of the 28 defendants in that case who've taken plea deals have gotten some sort of probation. And I think that Young Thug is probably he's probably asking for either some sort of time served. He's been locked up for over 2 years. Or some sort of probation. I'm not sure that Fonnie Willis will sign off on him not doing more time, but it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out. And speaking of in New York, Lauren, yesterday there was a lot of media attention. I think you were the first to bring it to my attention through a text about what was going on at the place where Diddy is being held. Investigators from multiple federal agencies launched an interagency operation at the troubled jail. The Bureau of Prisons, the Justice Department's Inspector General's office, and other law enforcement agencies descended on the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. The Bureau of Prisons said in a statement, they said the law enforcement operation was designed to achieve, quote, our standard goal of maintaining a safe environment for both our employees and the incarcerated individuals housed at MDC Brooklyn. Of course, prison officials declined to provide specific details. Puffy's lawyer said that there's been a litany of horrors, as he described it, at the jail, including deplorable conditions, rampant violence, and multiple deaths. So, I mean, when you saw that come across, immediately, interagency, this is an operation going on. What's going on with Diddy? Are we having another Epstein moment?
I doubt it. I think we're having another I don't know what type of moment we're having. We're starting to see some unprecedented things directed at the lawyers of Sean Combs. And as somebody whose father worked at another notorious place of incarceration in New York, Rikers Island, it doesn't surprise me that this facility is having some major problems. I think that Sean Combs, we're seeing some things with regard to his bond and not being out of prison and all that are unusual, that are typically not seen. This is not to say
Lauren, they gave Abercrombie and Fitch's CEO a $10 million bond. Same exact charges as Diddy. Diddy offers up his left arm, right arm, toes, and everything, and 50 million plus his whole family's passports, and they say no.
Yeah, Black defendants are treated differently in the United States. I mean, we saw a guy, Marcellus Williams, get executed with the people in the prosecution saying that there might be something really wrong with this. Then we saw a white guy, what was it, Texas? And then there was a stay. There was a stay. It was, we're not going to execute him. We need to check this out again. I mean,
yeah.
It is
and the white guy allegedly, was found guilty of killing his little baby.
Right. And I have no idea whether he did it or not, but there was a difference in what happened, right? We're gonna go check. It was what happened. Well, why couldn't they go check with Marcellus Williams? I mean, when you're doing a death penalty, you should be very careful. And I think anything with the justice system certainly has worked much differently for particularly Black men in the United States. And Sean Combs, there's clearly a difference in what we're seeing. I'm trying to think of another defendant where they held the defendant with no bond, even when they put it at some outrageous astronomical amount. And it makes me say to myself, if in fact he's this dangerous, which let's say the state is right. Let's say the state is correct that he is in fact this dangerous. Then where the hell have they been for the last 20 years? Where was Cyrus Vance? Right? Where was all this concern during the start of the Me Too movement in 2017?
This was a concern last year when he got the key to the city.
Right. So, I mean, if he's that dangerous that we're holding him in this unprecedented manner that you've never heard of before, then the authorities were derelict in not putting him in earlier. I find it hard to believe that anybody could see that there's not a racial double standard there. I'm just saying, show me another defendant that hasn't been able to get out.
The exact same charges, sex trafficking, RICO, the exact same charges that Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, how you say that, and this guy walks away. He doesn't even spend an hour behind bars. He posts a $10 million bond.
Wow.
Diddy sells his home and does everything, puts up his other homes and 50 million in cash, says, I will stay home, put me on house arrest while I wait trial, put an ankle monitor on me, and 50 million.
Notice too, with Abercrombie and Fitch guy, we're not getting spectacular raids of his home. So you didn't get the spectacular raids that are finding videos and all this other stuff. So it's different for Black folks when it comes to the justice system in the United States.
Here says, meanwhile, Candace Owens was denied a visa into Australia. Did you see that story, Lauren?
No, I didn't. I really try to ignore Candace Owens, but go ahead.
Right. One last thing before we let you go today, Lauren. So it's always so great having you on. I've got to bring this up. It's happened the other day. Shaquille O'Neal is still facing some backlash for making really some seriously creepy comments to and about Angel Reese. Shaq, of course, is 52 years old. Angel's 22. Shaq has kids older than Angel, and that this. So here's the thing with that. This relationship, LSU alums both. Shaq took on this uncle-like, father figure-like relationship with her. Yet he comments on her shorts and how he would like to see her dunk in those shorts. And she was obviously uncomfortable, and she kept saying okay. She kept trying to get him to move on from her, as he put it, pair of quote little shorts. And they were little, there's no question about it. But even I'm older than Shaq, and I would not be addressing. I don't know her. I have no connection to her, but I would not be addressing a 22-year-old Angel Reese or a 22-year-old anyone about that. Now, if people think she's sexualizing herself or whatever, and even Shaq thinks so. There are ways in which you can convey that without being creepy like Shaq was, and he is getting a lot of heat on social media.
Yeah, I only in passing kind of saw what was going on. I'm a big Angel Reese fan. You know, we live in a day and age where outrage culture is a thing. It drives a lot of the content of social media platforms. I can't imagine that Shaquille O'Neal has not understood that for the last, I'd say about 7 or 8 years in particular. So you have to be very careful about what you say and what you do. And at the same time, I'll say this just generally and globally, not really specific to Angel Reese. I'm a little bit surprised at the level of sexualization that people get into with younger women. And I think because we're socialized for that, people don't often realize what image and message they are projecting. Okay. But I don't think it's the fault necessarily of the projector, but I do think that when you project a certain image and you get a reaction, you shouldn't be surprised. I mean, I was a little bit shocked that, you know how they have these dance troops at these parades, typical Black community parade will have 4 or 5 young Black dance troops with girls that are between the ages of 7 and 14. And I'm shocked sometimes. I saw a parade. Like I said, I was in Norfolk. I was shocked at how sort of sexual the moves were. I mean, I don't know whether I'm just getting older or what.
Lauren, I took my daughter, who she just turned 18. I took her to homecoming because stuff like that, right? I took her to homecoming, and I was talking with the principal. Me and the principal just, as they say, chopping it up. And the thing about this, you had at homecoming, you have the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, 14-year-olds, 15 to 18, right? And girls as young as 14, you talk the things that they were wearing that left nothing to the imagination whatsoever.
Right.
The dancing, the twerking, and all of that stuff. And me and the principal is a woman, and we're both like, how does the parents allow this? And the culture is so different now, but it still does not give Shaq or me or anybody like us the right to, talk about sexualize them. They're doing it themselves anyway, but to look at them in that way. Shaq was saying to Angel in this interview, he's like, "Oh no, you're not beautiful, you're not good looking, you're gorgeous, and I would love to see you do this and do that." And she wore these particular short shorts to Wild 'N Out, and he kept referencing that, and she kept trying to change the conversation or end it, and he kept going on and on. It is just like you said, they are projecting this image, I guess. The Megan Thee Stallions of the world, the Cardi B's of the world, Nicki Minaj's, they all are projecting this sexual persona. And this is the shorts that Shaq was talking about.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you're projecting that, you're projecting that. And I'm not sure why anybody's shocked at you might get a reaction at projecting that. I mean, so I think a lot of times people want it both ways. I mean, we do have to keep in mind she's only 22 years old. So it's kind of like, she's just now getting used to, big time fame, and she's only 22 years old. Oh, I think we have to figure that into this. It's not a 40-year-old lady or a 35-year-old or something like that. She's young, right? So I always say to myself, okay, how old is the person? She's young enough that you don't necessarily completely perceive every message that you're sending when you're 22. So, I mean, I think it's age appropriate in terms of, sort of, like you said, modeling after Megan Thee Stallion, because the women that she grew up watching is going to be Megan Thee Stallion, Lizzo, and that group right there. Look, I'm not expecting people to come out, dressed Victorian and doing ballet. I mean, at the same time, I do think you should be self-aware, and your parents should be self-aware, and the school should be self-aware. Because girls I saw at the parade were young; they were not no 22. This is not like the this is not the Spartan bands, dancers where they're like 18 to 22, and everybody knows what time it is generally about what we're projecting. Which, by the way, they don't typically project sexually. But anyway, these were young girls. It's like really young girls, and I thought, wow, really? Y'all got them out here like sort of twerking, in the street in public. And I'm thinking, man, I'm not trying to be overly prudish or old fashioned. I'm just saying, if that's the image that you're projecting, don't get surprised when somebody comments on it, which basically Shaq is commenting on it. Now, should he have read the cues as you outlined it? He didn't read the cues that she's sending in the conversation to move on. You need to read the cues, okay? Particularly at 50-something years old, you should be understanding. Right. Okay, she wants to move on, and at 50-something, you have no excuse for not picking up on that, okay? But at the same time, you
put yourself in the role as the mentor,
right? Well, mentors and mentees, when you have a young woman, an older guy, that is going to quickly. I mean, people have crushes and fall in love with people.
I think you're 100% right too on the aspect of Angel, because she's now becoming she's a star who's becoming a superstar, a sought after individual, modeling contracts. She's on Vogue. She's doing the Sports Illustrated swimsuit. And she's really, really starting with these endorsements, and she still needs guidance. She's 22. And I think Lauren froze up. Oh boy. Well, that's it was creepy. Power 96. It was really creepy. He says that's why I only go into the DMs of celebrity women who are 50 and older. He said JJ Fad loves it. Oh my God. We will definitely end on that note. Thanks so much for joining us. Continue to subscribe. Have folks that you know who haven't yet subscribed to LIBK-News on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Give us your thoughts, and we'll see you tomorrow.